I'd like to address now a thorny issue in that the first one is really for those who take a more natural perspective, and their belief system is such that cows produce milk and should be given to calves. It's not designed for humans. It should not be consumed for humans. That is their general philosophical perspective. And I wonder if you can address that one first, and then we'll address the other primary objection to using milk.
Well, the whole question of why humans should be drinking milk is a good question. If you take all the supermarkets away, so we don't have full shelves all around us that we can go in any store and pick up any food we want at any time to allay our hunger, you are left in a place that you could starve very quickly. So supermarkets have brought that question to bear. But if you look at Jamestown, one of the colonies established in 1630, the colonists, the citizens there in Jamestown in 1630 were starving to death, and 100 cows coming in from Europe on a ship saved their lives. We failed to understand that in early America, it was the cows that actually allowed us to survive. We could eat them if we got really hungry, and obviously they produced milk for us during the wintertime when there's no other food to eat, and they could make cheese and butter and cream and those other things, which are very nutrient dense. Cows have 4 stomachs, so they can eat grass. We have a very hard time eating grass because we have one stomach. We can't digest the grass and make much energy out of it. But cows have 4 stomachs, and they also chew their cud. They're ruminants. So they are literally that animal between us and the sun. They're solar sun converters. They take sunshine expressed as grass on the ground, because the grass obviously grows when the sun hits the ground and water and grass grows. We can't eat the grass, but the cow can eat the grass, and then we can eat what the cow provides to us. And what cow provides to us is very, very nutrient dense and very digestible by humans. So if you take away the supermarkets, you'd beg for a cow or a goat or a sheep or a camel or a horse to be able to get that sunlight and that grass to be a food that you could eat. It's kind of a modern day thing.
I agree with that. Let me interject here because there's a potential area for just a refinement of some sort. Because obviously humans do eat plants, and there are many vegetarians and vegans. It's just that the plants that we eat are such that we actually have the enzymes to break them down, but the cow doesn't really have the enzymes to do it. But because of their physiology, actually anatomy, they have a number of different stomachs and actually have bacteria in these stomachs that actually do have the metabolic machinery to break down the grass to energy that the cow utilizes to produce food for us. Is that an accurate assessment?
You're exactly right. The cows have that ability to digest food through their enzymatic and bacterial function in their gut that we can't. I don't quite understand the whole vegan philosophy. A lot of it's based on animal welfare issues, and some of it's very well grounded because of the way animals have been treated. But I've had so many vegetarians and vegans come to Organic Pastures Dairy and literally be converted because of the fact that they see the cow on a green grass pasture and they see her being treated really, really well. And their whole issue about animal husbandry and practices is their concerns are allayed. And one of the big problems that vegans and vegetarians have, not so much vegetarians but vegans, is the fact that they don't have any good fats in their diet. And their nervous system starts to suffer because the nerves need to have those good cholesterols and those good fatty acids to protect them and insulate them. Those Schwann cells that are part of the nervous tissue, protect the nerves. The insulators are kind of shrink and they don't work real well. So you see people that actually have not had a good animal fat in a long time have some raw cream, and boy, I tell you, they start to relax and they go, oh my God, nirvana, this is fantastic. Their body's craving these good fats they've been missing in their diet. So I don't know. There's kind of an interesting neutro-political thing going on with animal welfare, and it kind of goes over into the whole political environment of what food we should be eating. But I'm one that believes in a balanced diet of all things, not just eating one thing.
Well, that's a good point, and I forget to frequently make that in my arguments with people who promote a vegetarian diet, is that yes, there are fats from the plant kingdom. Clearly, probably maybe even the majority of fats come from the plant kingdom. But there's other fats that are animal based that really form a very functional complement to that. And then if we exclude them from our diet, eventually we're going to develop a deficiency and suffer physiological consequences. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. But I'm wondering if you could comment also on the species issue. My guess is sort of implying from what you said, and the argument would be that the concern that some people address is that milk from cows is designed for calves, it's not for humans. But it sounds like that there's a historical precedent in using cows to survive. So clearly it works, even though it may not address the ideal issue. Obviously, the ideal milk for humans is going to come from a human. So, but do you think there's enough similarity between the species that the proteins and the products are going to provide nearly very similar benefits?
Well, Joe, I think you make a very good point, because the last 60 years, I think a very good argument can be made that milk that's been pasteurized certainly does not appear to fit any of the human profiles for needs. It causes lactose intolerance, it causes bone density problems, it causes all kinds of problems. So when you talk about, quote, just milk, and that milk is pasteurized, I think that kind of morphs itself into a pseudoscience idea where you have a philosophy that milk shouldn't be consumed for humans because look at all the problems it causes. But we're not talking about raw milk there. When you look at raw milk, there's a wonderful match there. Now, I am the first to say all babies should be nursed by the mother if at all possible. Mother's milk is absolutely the most imperative, antibody-rich, wonderful food for babies, and babies that are nursed are thrive. But when mom's sick and tired of nursing the baby and the kid's going to be a little older, maybe a year older or whatever, 6 months, a year and a half, and mom decides to wean the child, it literally is a car wreck when you look at the child's immune development going from breast milk to a sterile, some kind of, baby food, baby formula. The kids start having ear infections, mucus responses, and all kinds of histamine problems and gut problems and irritable bowel. And they have all these challenges. Where if they go to raw milk from a cow, they generally do not have any of those kinds of responses. In fact, we've seen this with Valley Children's Hospital here locally, where they've had a child, literally, they had us respond emergency to the hospital to deliver raw milk because they had to have it for this child who was having such terrible gut cramps and gas cramps and colic and everything else. The doctor said, I need to have this kid on raw milk immediately. And they did. They actually had us go over to the hospital and provide the raw milk. And this child, within hours, was feeling a whole different way. So when we talk about milk being mismatched for humans, I think we're talking about pasteurized milk and how it's kind of morphed into a philosophy that's kind of a current paradigm philosophy versus raw milk, which has been fed to people. And the people that had contact with raw milk and availability of raw milk historically always had a distinct advantage, a competitive advantage over those that did not, because the availability of it, the nutrient richness of it, and the fact that they had more density per cup of milk than perhaps some other peoples did, because the milk was readily available, consistently available, and available all year long, versus somebody that would feast and famine all year long from things that were, less nutrient dense. Dr. Ted Beals talks a lot about the competitive advantage that people have had when they've had raw milk in their diets, and whether that be from cows or goats or sheep or horses or whatever, be a yak in outer Mongolia, they had a competitive advantage. I'm obviously I love cow's milk, although I heard a lot of arguments about other milks as well. But the Indian culture, the Hindus have said forever that the cow is the mother of the universe. That they're literally when mankind couldn't feed themselves, the cow fed them. And there's a lot to that in terms of the history of man and the fact that they relied upon cows to feed them when they were starving.
Interesting. Well, thank you for addressing that. And then, so the other argument that is, I think, far easier to counter is that proposed by virtually all of the public health authorities, and really what makes it such a challenge to acquire this phenomenal food as a resource. And that they are, and maybe if you can go over the history of how this happened, I have some idea of it, but I'm sure you'll have a greater expansion, far more detail, as to how this crazy restriction got implemented and requiring and mandating pasteurization for the protection of the public from these pathogens, which to me seem to be a result of poor farming practices that really raised the animals improperly in many places, in many times inhumanely, and as a result changed the ecosystem on them and allowed bad bacteria to proliferate and produce milk that could in fact get people sick. So it really was a substitute for healthy farming practices, it would seem, and now it's become really the standard, and people become authorities become very militant about restricting this to the point where they're incarcerating people for violating these standards. So I'm wondering if you can comment on that.